Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk about how to read and write from text files using C#. So let's go ahead and get started with this. Okay, so here I have a class called File Demo. This is the only file in our project other than our text file, but I'll show you how to create that in a little while. In our class we have the main, and then in our class we have two static methods. One is read from file, another one is called write to file, and both of these take parameter of a string, and we'll call it file path. This read from file method here will use the StreamReader, and this static method will use the StreamWriter. So before you start actually using text files and using StreamReader and StreamWriter, in order to get access to these two classes, you're going to need to put a using statement for using system.io for input output. Alright, so without this you won't be able to do much with text files. Alright, so this is the first thing you need to do, so don't forget that. Okay, so before we begin our text file, let me show you where you need to create it or how you can create it. What I recommend is going here to Solution Explorer, go to right click, and then click on Open Folder in File Explorer. So click there, and this will take us straight to the project. That way you don't have to go hunting through all your projects and documents folder. This will take you directly into the project you created in the projects folder, wherever it's located. And then if we go inside the bin folder, then we have two other folders here. The one that you're going to want to use is the debug folder. So click here, and here you should have a list of all the files. Once we create the project, you'll have an executable here that will run when you're testing this. Right, it's in the debug folder. So we'll look at that in a little while. Here you can create your text file. Just right click, new, and then just click text file, and then we can name it. We'll name it test. Okay, so that will be where our text file is located, and we'll call it text. And if you double click on it, actually I'm going to open it with Notepad. There's nothing in here, it's empty, right? So we'll check on this later on and see if we can actually write stuff to it. Alright, so just make sure it's there in the debug folder. Okay. So then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the read from file method. So here, first thing you need to do is create a StreamReader object. So we're going to type, I'll zoom in a bit, we're going to type StreamReader, and we'll give this object a name. We'll call it reader, and it's going to equal new StreamReader. Oh, I forgot the R. StreamReader. and it takes an argument of a string. You could do something like this, test.text for the name of our text file. But since we're going to pass an argument that we can use in the form of a string variable, then we can replace this with file path. Okay. And then the file path would come from the main. So maybe in the main we can put string file, lowercase, file path, and then set it equal to the name of your text file. So here in our example we called it test.txt for the file extension, semicolon. Okay, so we'll come back to the main. Alright, so once you have your StreamReader, object created, then what we're going to want to do is we're going to use a while loop to read all the lines in our text file. So to do that, it would be while not reader dot end of stream. Right, so as long as there's lines in our text file, this loop will continue to read from that text file. Right, and then so that way we can view the contents of the text file. We're going to need to write them to the console. So we're going to do console dot write line. And what do we want to write to the console? Well, we want to write the contents in the text file. And then for that, we're going to use our StreamReader object. So that's going to be reader dot, and then we're going to read each line inside our text file. So this will get a line from the text file, and then that line will be written to the console. And then this will continue to occur while there is still lines left in our text file. We'll test that out in a little bit. When you're finished reading every single line, the other very important thing you need to do is you need to close your reader object. All right, so to close it, it would be reader dot close. And it has to be closed out once you're done with it. Otherwise, it'll cause errors later on if you try to read it again, or if you try to write to it, then you'll have problems. Okay, so let's go back to our text file. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to Open Folder in File Explorer. I'm going to go to the debug. I'm going to go here. I'm going to open with Notepad, and I'm just going to manually enter some information here just so we can test it out. So I'll put a name. I'll put Bob, Mary, Tom, and Nick. And then I'm going to save this, close it out, go here, and then here in our main we're going to call our read from file method. So do a method call read from file, and it takes one argument. It takes the file path. And since this is a static method, we don't need to create an object of file demo. We can just simply call the method in the class. Okay, so then I'm going to Control F5, and it displays all the names in our text file. Yeah, so it was using this loop here. I can prove that to you real quick. We can do maybe something like int count equals 0, and then here we'll do count plus plus. So we'll see how many times this loop ran. I'll print to the console dot write line, and then I will write there are names in your text file, and then I will pass count. Alright, so that should tell us how many times the while loop ran, because each time it runs it'll increment by 1. Okay, so let me run it again. Control F5. Right. There are 4 names in your text file. Alright, so each time the loop ran, it counts them. Okay. So reading from a text file isn't too difficult, and neither is writing to the text file. Right, so now we'll work on the write to file method. Okay, so first thing you're going to want to do is create a StreamWriter object. So that would be StreamWriter. We can call it something like writer equals new StreamWriter, and the StreamWriter will take 2 arguments. It will take a file path, and we need to set the encoding to true. If you don't set the second parameter to true, then the writer will not append to the text file. It'll just write over all the contents, and you'll lose all the names that are in there to begin with. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to prompt the user for a name. But that name that we prompt them for, we need to store it in a temp variable, and we're not going to actually know how many names the user wants to enter into the text file. So we can't really use a for loop or a while loop with a counter. What we're going to need is a do while loop and a sentinel controlled do while loop, to be more specific. So first of all, let's create a string to hold whatever input the user provides, a temporary string. We'll initialize it to string.empty, and then let's create our do while loop. Do while temp does not equal, and we'll create some sort of sentinel, -1. Right, so if the user enters a -1 at any point, then this do while loop should terminate. Inside the do while loop, we need to prompt the user, ask them for a name, and then store that name in the temp variable, and then pass that temp variable to our StreamWriter object. Okay, so we'll do console.write line, or actually just write, sorry, and we'll ask for a name. Enter a name, and then in brackets -1 to exit. Right, so that will tell the user that if they want to stop entering names, they have to type a -1. Okay, and then we're going to use our temp variable to get the input from the user. So temp equals console dot read line, and then once we obtain the information from the user, then we'll pass this temp to our writer object. So then to do that, make a little bit of room here. We'll do writer dot write line, and we want to write whatever is in the temp variable. Okay, so we could leave this like this, but the problem with this is that the user has to type a -1 in order to terminate the do while loop, but the condition isn't checked until after the user writes the temp. So if the user types -1, then we'll end up with a -1 in our text file. So we don't want that, right? That -1 is not a name. But the way it's written here and the way this is set up, that's what would happen. The user would have to type -1, and the -1 would go inside the text file, and then the loop would terminate, right? So to prevent that from happening, we can just put this inside an if. So if temp does not equal -1, then we'll write the temp to the text file using the writer.writeLine temp. If they enter a -1, then temp does equal -1, so then no writing will occur, and then the while loop will check the condition, and -1 is equal to -1, so then this entire loop would terminate. It would finish. It would break. Now the last thing you need to do, and you do this for both the writer and the reader, is you need to close the file. So to close this StreamReader object, you do writer dot close. Right, so don't forget to close it. Right, if you do forget, you'll have you'll encounter quite a few problems. Okay, so I think that's about it for the write to file method. So what we could do is, before we read from the file to display its contents, let's go ahead and write to it. Write to file, and then provide the file path. So then that's going to be file path. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to my text file. Go to bin, debug, and I'm going to open it using Notepad. Open with Notepad. And I'm going to get rid of all this. That way we can actually write to it without having to go to it manually. So I'm going to delete all that. I'm going to save. I'm going to close. Okay, so now let me run it. Control F5. So here, enter a name, -1 to exit. So I'm going to enter Nick, Bob, Mary, or Marty's fine, Marty, Susan, and then enter. And then I'm going to do -1, and that should stop prompting me for names, and hopefully if we did this correctly, all the names should be displayed, because after here we're calling the write to file method, but then once we finish with this, then the read from file method will be called, and then it should read the contents inside our text file. So then press enter. All right, and then it reads all the names, and it says there's 4 names in the text file, and then press any key to continue. Now we can actually go back, right click File, open in File Explorer, go to bin, debug, and then we can open this with Notepad, and then we can actually see all our names that have been written there. Let's try it again. Control F5. Let's write a few more names. This time we'll do Dan, Larry. I'm running out of names. Kool-Aid. -1. Okay, so now we have 7 names: Nick, Bob, Marty, Susan, Dan, Larry, Kool-Aid. Okay, so go ahead and try this out. If you have any issues, please email me, and I'll do my best to help you out. Okay, thank you for watching.